to everyone who complained I didn't use this piece of music for the Cell Arc opening, here you are. Happy? Welcome one and all, new and old faces alike. And it seems like there must be quite a few new faces. I'm pleased to say that in the wake of the Cell Arc Part 8, my subscribers have grown by over 1,200. That's very exciting and I am very grateful. So for those of you unfamiliar, while Dragon Ball Dissection's primary focus is the original manga storyline, I also break away from it when the storyline reaches the release date of a movie. Clash, 10 Billion Powerful Warriors premiered March 7th, 1992, my 6th birthday by the by, as Piccolo is confronting Cell in the manga, and right after Vegeta destroys number 19 in the TV adaptation. In it, Frieza's brother Coola from the last movie has returned, this time controlling a giant computer planet called the Big Getti Star. The Big Getti Star survives by getting all tentacle hentai on other planets and stripping out all the nutrients, not too dissimilar from movie 3, albeit with quite a bit more thrusting involved. But in this case, the Big Getti Star has gone after new Namek, as if those guys haven't had it bad enough. Once Goku and the others get wind of this, they head off to save the day through the usual means of punching things really, really hard. The odd thing, though, is how Goku and the others get wind of the problem. They find out through Dende. Now, you might be thinking, that's not odd. He's a Namekian, he knows the Earthlings, so it makes sense he'd be the one to reach out to Earth and ask them to come save him. But no. Dende doesn't need saving. He's not on planet Namek, he's living on Earth. Or rather, above Earth. Because Dende's God now. What? Where did that even come from? It's not explained, it's not commented on. Aside from the teaser, Dende doesn't even appear in the movie at all. He's just God now, shut up, don't question it. Also in this movie, Goku is an archaeologist and Oolong is female, as long as we're making changes at complete random. There it is. The sound of hundreds of irate nerds frantically typing out something along the lines of, "Don't you know anything about Dragon Ball? Dende takes over the role of Kami in the series. Everybody knows that. How can you say this is random? Unsubscribed." Brings me such joy. Also, I can call you nerds because I'm a nerd too. I have N-word privilege. Anyway, before you hit that reply button, let me save you some trouble by taking you back to a couple of paragraphs ago. Oh, the nostalgia. Clash, 10 Billion Powerful Warriors premiered March 7th, 1992, my 6th birthday by the by, as Piccolo is confronting Cell in the manga, and right after Vegeta destroys number 19 in the TV adaptation. Now, what do those 2 points in the series have in common? Well, they both take place long before Dende becomes God, I can tell you that. In the animated series, God was still God. In fact, Dende becoming God doesn't come up until October 6th, 1992, 7 months after this movie came out. So yeah, I am really dying to know more about this because, to my shock and amazement, I have never been able to find any official comment on how or why this happened. Preempting a major plot point seems like a really big story, on par with all the rewrites of antagonists that took place in the Cell arc. As far as I can figure, this has to be one of 3 things, unless you assume Toei are full of psychics. 1. It's just a complete coincidence. Toei randomly came up with the idea and put it in their movie. Toriyama independently came up with the same idea and put it into his manga. But I don't find that very likely. 2. Toei came up with the idea, Toriyama liked it and put it in his manga a la Bardock. Slightly more plausible, but I'm not entirely convinced. 3. While conversing with Toei, Toriyama talked about his decision to have Piccolo assimilate God, and that he was going to eventually replace God with Dende. That seems the most likely to me. However, I still have a hard time buying it because if it's true, Toei Animation knowingly revealed a massive spoiler. I mean, they preempted Toriyama's Super Saiyan, but it was their own design for a known concept that was already building steam in the main story. Since I've never seen any mention of it anywhere, it doesn't seem to have created any major controversy, but I have to wonder how many fans at the time were left scratching their heads. Even dismissing whose idea it was, it seems like a really bizarre thing to put in this movie. It's confusing, it doesn't add anything of value, and it would have made far more sense just to have Dende on the planet. It certainly would have generated more pathos as we'd actually see a Namekian character suffering we know and care about. The only way I see this making sense and not causing a huge fight is if number 3 is true, and Toriyama encouraged them to put it in the movie because he mistakenly believed he'd get the character in much earlier than he ultimately did. Personally, I think this faux pas is the most fascinating thing about this movie by far, but that doesn't mean there's nothing else to talk about. Vegeta makes his film debut here. I have seen people wonder why it took them this long to put Vegeta into a movie, given how long he'd been a character in the series by this point. And I find that a rather odd question because, while, yeah, he had been a Dragon Ball staple for 3 years, he'd been a villain for most of that time, with no indication he'd permanently ally himself with the heroes. And unlike, say, Piccolo in the first Z movie, who was used as a villainous ally, Vegeta isn't native to Earth, which is where all the movies up to now have taken place. What was an earlier movie supposed to do? Just have him randomly live on Earth, eating barbecue with the rest of the main characters, with no real justification? That'd be silly! Of course, then again, I'm saying this in a movie where Dende is just randomly there, so why am I even trying to credit the movies with common sense? But this movie wastes no time in introducing Vegeta's movie character shtick, showing up in the middle of the movie to save Goku while saying, "I didn't come here to save you, it's just that you must be defeated by my hand." And it's worth mentioning that this is almost identical to his saving of Goku from number 19, right down to Goku being held by the throat. Tangentially related to that, I do find it funny that the last 4 movies have taken place on Earth, while the TV series had the gang either on Namek or on the way to Namek. Now, it's the first time a movie comes out when the characters in the series are back on Earth, and the movie has them on Namek. Funny how life works out, isn't it? Also, this movie marks Yajirobe's theatrical debut. Oh, this is the 3rd movie in a row I've said that? Well, that's wrong. I shouldn't have said it this time. But last time, I stand by what I said. See, this is a little known fact, but there are actually 2 different Yajirobes, as shown here in the original manga spine art. Clearly what I meant is that this Yajirobe had his debut in movie 4, and this one had his debut in movie 5. See, I'm not the crazy one, you're the crazy ones! Movie 6 isn't terrible, but it certainly isn't one that I find stands out that well. It loses big marks for not having any bookend leisure activities, which, as I've said before, tend to be the best part about these mid-Z movies. Z Movie 1 really didn't either, but it had, well, more story to it. This movie is almost all fighting, which is not my cup of tea. I'm not saying the random leisure activities are good writing, since they're almost always completely removed from what the movie is actually about, but they're an oasis of variety in a desert of non-stop fighting. When it doesn't have even that, it's disappointing to me. Metal Coola himself has quite a nice, simple design. Its smooth, metallic appearance is a far cry from Mecha Freeza's patched-together look. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, they both work for different reasons. Mecha Freeza is supposed to look rather pathetic. However, Metal Coola's stark contrast could subtly belie the secret that he's really not anything like the cybernetic version of Freeza. While this movie is all fighting, it's actually pretty good. I mean, yes, there are some really bad drawings in there that are held just long enough to be extremely noticeable. However, a lot of the choreography is quite memorable. The funny thing is this movie coincidentally foreshadows a couple of battle tactics from slightly later in the series. At this point, while teleportation has been introduced, it really hasn't been shown outside of that introduction. It's certainly never been used in a fight. But Goku and Coola have a whole teleportation battle, including some weird, trippy teleportation world they travel through. Goku using teleportation as a fighting tactic will see a lot of play in the later parts of the Cell arc, although that won't. And Metal Coola can use the power of the big Getti Star to regenerate broken components. And, yeah, regeneration is going to be used a lot for the rest of the series. 3 guesses how I feel about that. But it actually works quite a bit better here than it will in the series. There's still that overwhelming dread caused by Goku's and Vegeta's hard work being all for nothing. Since the two of them do get progressively more tired and beaten over the course of the fight, it feels like a major element rather than simply an excuse to prolong the battle. And unlike the villains in the series, the regeneration ability doesn't make Coola practically wanked out invincible until the moment where the story decides it's over. Goku and Vegeta actually figure out that if they push through with their assault enough to damage him in multiple places, and then attack again while Coola is at his weakest, while he is regenerating, then that will stop him. The pacing works really well. It takes them just enough time to recover from their initial attack that you wonder if they'll be able to muster enough energy before Coola fully puts himself together. Because of that, when Metal Coola finally goes down, it's very satisfying, not arbitrary. It feels like a victory that's earned. And that makes the reveal even more impactful. Metal Coola isn't even Coola. He's just one of a mass-produced army in Coola's image, and when dozens of other Coolas appear over the horizon and begin sliding down the hill, you feel that hopelessness. The direction here is great too, choosing not to show the ensuing fight, but rather ending the scene as Goku and Vegeta begin their last-ditch effort and cutting to them in captivity. The only mistake they make in this scene is having Goku say, "We just barely defeated him." See, this is what show don't tell means, or in this case, don't show and tell. The exhaustion of Goku and Vegeta, the music, the dozens of Coolas, all of those perfectly demonstrate the futility of the situation. Having Goku state the bloody obvious on top of that, well, it doesn't ruin the scene by a long shot, but it does frustratingly thwart perfection. But that little mistake is not enough to invalidate this. I really did not plan to say this when I started prepping for this review, but I actually think this is some of the most emotionally engaging fighting we've seen since the Saiyan arc. Seriously. You know, some iffy animation notwithstanding. As an aside, while 10 billion is quite an excessive number compared to the Coolas we actually see, it is specific enough to the plot that this is one of the movie titles I have an easier time remembering. The struggle continues against the real Coola, who, similar to Freeza, is battered and broken and clinging to life through technology. His ultimate plan is to steal Goku's and Vegeta's Super Saiyan energy to power the big Getti Star, but in a plotline that Toriyama will use later in the Buu arc, Goku and Vegeta purposely pump in so much energy it overloads the complex. So, just like last movie, Coola is defeated by his own poor choices, but it doesn't feel nearly as poignant here. There are other characters in this movie besides Goku and Vegeta, none of whom matter in the slightest. Gohan, Krillin, and Piccolo get to fight the minion bots, and it's not that interesting. They get their butts kicked, especially Krillin, because they can't penetrate their armor until Piccolo tells them to concentrate their ki at the point of their strikes, at which point they go down easily. Yeah, obviously. Why weren't they doing that in the first place? The Turtle Sage, Yajirobe, and Oolong serve as 3-pronged comic relief, but aside from one gag, it's not all that memorable, and they don't really have any purpose for being here. I believe they explicitly say that Yajirobe is there to hand out Senzu because apparently he's the only person who can hold a bag. Okay, given how I complained about Goku losing the Senzu just a few DBD episodes ago, maybe that's actually a fair point. The music here is pretty good and serves as the backbone for a lot of the Cell arc in the anime, hence a lot of people's insistence that I use the piece of music I used here for the opening of the Cell arc. My favorite track, while used very sparingly in the series, is the piece used when Coola regenerates his arm. In particular, it ends up being used for when Piccolo assimilates God, and it lends the scene quite a bit of weight. And the ending song tells me that I'm the hero guy, and that's just hilariously awesome. With a theatrical color palette, Namek looks quite a bit more vibrant than in the TV series, although it doesn't look all that much like Toriyama's new Namek we'll eventually see. The movie goes for a more lush but otherwise identical copy of the original planet rather than a brand new one. And now it's time for my ongoing movie segment of Why Can't I Fit This Square Peg Into This Round Hole?, where I fruitlessly try to pinpoint where in the main series timeline a movie is referencing. Given Goku's and Kuririn's uniforms, Vegeta's ability to go Super Saiyan, and, most tellingly, Gohan's age, hair, and clothing, this is obviously the characters being plucked out of the early Cell arc. And of course, there is absolutely no point in time during these events where they could have stepped out to go to another planet. Not even the 3-year gap would work because no one's supposed to know Vegeta's a Super Saiyan until he shows up to defeat number 19. I suppose if you fudge it, you could say that no one but Goku saw him properly, or if you really fudge it, you could go the Garlic Jr. route and say, who cares if they already met Gohan? But of course, even if you look past all that, the biggest, most insurmountable problem is Dende and whatever the holy kami he's doing here. That alone should be enough to invalidate this entire thing. There is no point in the series where Dende and Gohan at this age coincide. But like with the last movie, Daizenshuu 6 seems bound and determined to force Coola movies into the main animated continuity, presumably because of his GT appearance. So they prioritize Dende's presence and go the other direction by claiming this movie takes place much, much later than it came out, namely in the days of peace leading up to the Cell games. That does work a bit better in terms of having enough downtime to fit in this little vacation, and might even explain how they know where New Namek is, as Goku visits during that point in the series. That said, New Namek would have to be a heck of a lot closer than the old one was. But it really doesn't remotely work here either. As it usually comes down to with these desperate finaglings, Gohan's age just doesn't work. He's far too young, his hair's too long, he's in the wrong clothes, and he seemingly can't become a Super Saiyan. Hell, it's worse than that. At that point in the series, Goku and Gohan are supposed to be living permanently as Super Saiyans. And just like with the rationalization with the last movie, they're banking on placing it in a spot in the story that hadn't yet been written when this movie came out. Most likely, the powers that be hadn't even heard of Cell when they were writing this movie, so I doubt it was their intention to slot it in before the Cell games. So, yeah, there's no way to even remotely make this movie work. It's an early Cell arc movie because that's what's current, and you're not supposed to think about it any more deeply than that. Just like all of them. So that's the 6th Dragon Ball Z movie. It's about as fluffy as they come. Even by Dragon Ball Z movie standards, there's really nothing of substance here. I found myself, while watching this time, putting myself in the shoes of a non-fan, perhaps a parent accompanying his or her kid to its theatrical run, or really just anybody unfamiliar with Dragon Ball. And my immediate reaction was to think, geez, why would anybody like this crap? Unless fighting is literally all you care about, you really have to already be invested in Dragon Ball going in to take away even the slightest bit of enjoyment. And that's where this movie fails. There's practically no story, and the characters have been largely reduced to interchangeable action figures being lined up to punch each other. There is almost nothing in this movie that indicates anything significant about the characters' personalities or relationships to one another. There's that one guy. I guess he's the main guy because he's fighting the main bad guy. There's that other guy. Guess he kinda doesn't like that guy. Then there's that guy who fights. And there's that other guy who fights, but he's a kid. There's that other guy who fights, but not quite as well as the rest of them. There's the silly old guy, and the silly pig guy, and the silly fat guy. Then there are all those guys being captured, but I don't really know who any of them are. There's the hero guy. He's the hero guy. You're the hero guy. Has anyone noticed there isn't a single woman in this movie? Talk about failing the Bechdel test. Most of these complaints about thin stories and characterization can be applied to varying degrees to most of the original Dragon Ball Z movies. But all the ones we've looked at up till now have managed to include some elements that flesh these characters out as people, with actual motivations, goals, relationships, and loyalties. with movie 3 in particular being a standout example. And yet, here stands movie 6, as barren and one note as planet Namek itself. But all that said, I did enjoy it this time more than I thought I would. Even with threadbare characterization, Goku's and Vegeta's desperate struggles against Metal Coola are engrossing enough to carry that section of the film and spark a tiny bit of emotional investment. It's definitely one of the weaker films, but it's not the worst. When next we meet in Dragon Ball Dissection, we will be continuing with the main series with the Cell Arc Part 9. As always, thanks for watching.